My name is Jared Berglund. I'm the owner of Pure Vision Entertainment. I'm a mobile DJ. And the reason that we're here is I'd love to be able to share some of the stories and some of the experiences that I've had over the years in working mobile events to the outside world. So it was actually the morning of April 15th, 2023. I received a phone call from a family member, my soon-to-be sister-in-law actually, telling me that my dad had just gotten in an accident and was actually being transported to OHSU at the time. At that time, actually, I was right in the middle of DJing a club in downtown Portland. Luckily enough, it was about 12:50 in the morning and I was done at 1 a.m. I ended up getting up there probably about 1:15 or so, 1:20 in the morning, to immediately be pulled in a room and told that my dad had just passed away 3 minutes ago. Obviously, you don't expect that to happen whatsoever. So immediately at that point in time, it was, okay, how do I need to prepare myself? But how do I ultimately need to prepare myself to talk to my mother? My mom had been married to him for 42 years at the time. How do I prepare myself to talk to my brother? How do I talk to my wife and give her and call her? So that she was actually the first person that I called was my father-in-law, to wake him up and actually give him the news. Because I ultimately didn't want my wife to come down and have to deal with everything at the hospital because there wasn't going to be enough going on. And so I asked him if him and my mother-in-law Cheryl wouldn't mind coming over to the house and being with Ashley at the time, my wife. And so that allowed me to focus on my mom and my brother at the time. When they ended up getting into the hospital, I asked that nobody, have communication with them, at least for the time being, until I was, comfortable with that. So the hard part about it was, just seeing my mom and my brother when they first came in and just pulling them into a room. And ultimately, I couldn't have anybody else tell them. It had to come from me being the oldest sibling. But just in that time frame and just in that moment, just something told me, I was like, I can't have a nurse tell him, I have to. It was really kind of funny, honestly, because something I felt like had just prepared me for that moment, and just to be able to make sure that I was tending to and taking care of all the paperwork and just everything that the nurses and doctors needed, while my mom was being able to just accept and just take in what just happened, because obviously, you're not going to understand completely what just happened. I think it was about 4:30, 4:45, 5 a.m., something like that we finally wrapped up from the hospital. And I left, and so it was like, okay, let me go by my parents' house and pick up the dogs, because I knew that they were going to need to be attended to, and then come back to my house ultimately. By the time I got back, it was probably about 7:15, 7:30 in the morning. My mindset just automatically had to shift. It was, to tell you the truth, it was 45 minutes that I had to prepare basically to be able to get in my van. Luckily enough, I already had everything prepared for music wise. My van was already loaded, but I had to get in my van to be able to drive 4 hours north to a location called Mount Vernon, Washington, to go DJ a wedding. The funny thing at that time is my mother-in-law just asked a simple question. She's like, why don't you get one of your other DJs to go do this wedding? And at the time, like, the first thing was like, yeah, absolutely, that's the simple answer. But it's not so simple, because as a business owner and somebody who does mobile events for a living, you're always thinking about the what if scenario. What if this happens? What if that happens? A DJ or a videographer gets in a car accident or something happens to them. You think about it for yourself, but not as much. And in that point in time, it was literally just, okay, I have to step up. There is no way that I can have a DJ prepared in 45 minutes with music, with equipment, getting on the road to be able to drive. Most of them worked the night before. And so ultimately I was just like, Mom, I need a favor, to my mother-in-law. And I was like, can you please just be with my mom all day? Then it was to worry about my wife secondly, because it was, I knew she had a venue showcase that we also were involved. So I had DJs also at this venue showcase for a beautiful venue that we're a part of called Water Oasis. So it was worrying about her. Does she need to stay home? Do I need to be here for her? There's so many different things and scenarios that go through your head at that point in time that you maybe try to prepare for, but you ultimately never can. So as soon as I knew that my wife was taken care of with one of our great family friends, Grace, to be able to go out and be with her, I was like, okay, I've got everything set, at least for the time being. I cannot let this couple down. You know, when I think of a wedding, I think of it as the Super Bowl to me. I grew up playing football, and every game, we always had a game plan going in. On somebody's wedding day, I just ultimately, no matter what the case is, you cannot let them down. One of the hardest things I had to go through was a few years back, 5 years back or so, tearing my left Achilles and breaking both ankles 3 days before a wedding. I still was at the wedding, and that was one of the hardest things, but this was completely different. So long story short, make the drive up there, make the 4-hour drive up there. Beautiful venue up there. And so we get there, and my mindset is just like, okay, I need to try to block everything off, be mentally strong, and make sure that David and Angelica, the couple that I was working for and DJing with, do not know anything that's going on. That was my main focus, but also just trying to put the biggest face on that I could, because it was just, you know, at that point in time, you're numb, it felt like. So when I got to the venue, I went up to the venue manager and I went up to the photographer only, and they were both amazing. But ultimately I just was like, hey, here's what's going on. I've just lost my father in a car accident, probably about 6, 7 hours ago. So I'm coping and dealing with that. If I'm a little off, just please be patient with me. I'm still going to give them, the best, wedding possible. We got through everything. We get into toast, and it was actually one of the most memorable moments of the wedding. Was I don't remember quite who was giving the speech. I think it was maybe Angelica's sister or a sibling, but she ends up going and telling about the meaning of Angelica's name, which actually is derived from the word angel. And it was that moment that I was taken back, and it was a little tough because right after that moment was father-daughter dance, and so that was pretty tough. But in that moment, I knew there was a reason that I was here, and it was really cool because it was like my dad's talking to me while in the wedding, and it was kind of weird just to be able to be there in that moment and hear that. And be there. Ultimately, when we continued the wedding, and David was so cool. The groom, David, he was such a good guy. He came up to me probably about 3 or 4 times throughout the evening and asked me how I was doing. And I'm just trying to put the best face on. And I thought I was doing pretty good at the time, but I guess I wasn't. He ultimately ends up coming up to me at the end of the night. A couple minutes after we're done. The funny thing is, to backtrack, actually, Angelica and David were so sweet when they actually wrote me one of the best reviews. Actually, probably this was the best review I've ever received. She mentioned something that was really cool, and that meant a lot to me. Was we started a little bit earlier in the day, but we wanted to go till a little bit later, about 10 o'clock or so. It was a weird day with the weather and everything, but actually folks ended up leaving pretty early. But it came down to probably about Angelica and probably about 12 of her closest girlfriends and her bridesmaids. And she mentioned this, and this was one of the coolest things about the day, was she mentioned that I could have stopped. And she actually came up to me and asked me if we wanted to wrap up and everything. And my response right off the bat was, no, this is your wedding. This is a party. We're going to celebrate, and you have time with your girlfriends. So we continued to party for probably another hour and 10 minutes, just her and her 12 girlfriends. And it was so much fun just throwing a party for that, because it allowed me to escape. But ultimately I got brought back to it, because at the end of the night, about 5-10 minutes after they're saying some goodbyes, David comes up to me And I had already said goodbye to Angelica. And so David comes back up to me and he, asks me, you want to tell me what's going on? And I was like, no, I'm really good. I appreciate it. Thanks for checking in on me. It's like, no. I've been a firefighter for 9 years, and I can tell when something's bothering somebody. And I was like, okay, it is the end of the night. You guys have had a great night. I think I can finally say anything. And I was like, do you really want me to tell you? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, about 1:30 this morning, my dad passed away in a car accident. His reaction was just priceless, to be honest with you, because I feel like he was just so taken back. And his literally initial words were, what the F are you doing here? And I was like, to be honest, I couldn't bring it upon myself to let you guys down. To try to scramble and find somebody last minute. We had worked together. We had developed a bond, a friendship, and I couldn't let you guys down ultimately. And it was really a really cool moment. I don't want to get into any more of the conversation because that's between him and I, but it was a pretty special moment.